Hey, welcome back, everyone. All right, some big updates. We're going to talk now about Texas and Texas's lawsuit, which is challenging the election results in 4 different states, arguing that some of the changes made in these states when it came to messing with election integrity may have violated the Constitution. Actually, this Texas lawsuit could be among the most significant lawsuits we're seeing because it's not coming from a party that is deemed one of the, say, parties that has interest in the election itself. It's not from an aggrieved party. This is coming from, again, a state saying that how could our election count if these other states change the laws that we had to follow? Texas's move on this actually is going to be very, very interesting. Anyways, yeah, I'm broadcasting from my home again. Got my Christmas tree here. Hey. And yeah, good seeing you all here. Hey, James, California. Good seeing you. It's Stacy Meyer. Yeah, it's me. Good seeing you as always. Yeah, good on Texas. It'll be interesting to see what happens with this actually. Now I'm going to go over that. I want to go over some other updates as well. We're going to go over some updates with Dominion. You all might remember that of course, there's this audit going on now, this forensic examination of these 22 different Dominion machines, and the results of that are supposed to come out today. I have heard some noise on this. Nothing absolutely confirmed. I don't want to make absolute statements. I can say based on unconfirmed sources. Is my microphone popping? Is that better? Can you all still hear me? Is that good? All right. I can say that based on unconfirmed sources, but credible networks of sources, I should say, the findings on that are pretty significant, and we may see something as early as tomorrow in terms of reports from that. I'll be going a bit deeper into that now. Yeah, so you have to forgive me. I've been experimenting with this microphone and trying to find the best setting for it. I've been watching videos. It's not my specialty. I've been of course a print journalist for most of my career, and so getting used to still the video format. Instead of getting a static sound, is that better? Anything? Is that good? Are y'all good on it? All right. Anyways, I'm going to keep working on it. Let's see here. It's cracking. That's weird. So I just got regular tea today, those of you asking. All right. So it's good. All right, good. All right, thanks, everyone. Good to hear. All right, let's jump into the discussion for today. I'm going to go over some different, again, I'm going to start with the Texas ruling. We're going to go over some different news pieces. Also, folks, as usual, if you have questions, comments, leave them in the chat. I'll try to get to them. I try to get to them as fast as I can on here. I do have one of my team members off-site who's copying and pasting some of these as we go along. So working on this. All right, that said, let's jump into it. Oh, and also, folks, those of you who are going to be in Washington, D.C. this Saturday for the Stop the Steal rally, I will be there as well. I'm going to be doing, hopefully, a live broadcast. We're working on a pretty cool setup, so keep you all updated on that. And those of you who can't make it, as well, also, of course, we're going to be live broadcasting. We're working on a setup right now. So tune into this channel this Saturday. We're going to have hopefully a live broadcast from the protests in Washington. All right, that's it. Let's jump into the first story. We're going to start with Texas. I'll paste it in the live chat. Those of you coming in after this broadcast, check out the live chat. Now, it says Texas asks Supreme Court to rule election in 4 battleground states unconstitutional. The state of Texas on December 8th filed an election lawsuit in the U.S. Supreme Court against Pennsylvania, Georgia, Michigan, and Wisconsin, alleging that the states unconstitutionally changed election laws, treated voters unequally, and triggered significant voting irregularities by relaxing ballot integrity measures. Now, here's a quote from the Texas Attorney General, Ken Paxton. This is from a statement. Quote, Trust in the integrity of our election process is sacrosanct and binds our citizenry and the states in this union together. Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin destroyed that trust and compromised the security and integrity of the 2020 election. He said also, the states violated statutes enacted by their duly elected legislatures, thereby violating the Constitution. Now, in other words, remember what happened in a lot of these states. I'll turn the gain down, is that what you're saying? All right. How is that? Is that better? Is that sorry? Those of you asking. All right, how's the audio now? Is it still popping? Still have issues? Good? All right, we're good. Okay, now on this again, when we're talking about, one sec, turn the volume a bit. Sorry, folks. How's that? Is that better? Good? Double checking. All right. I'm gonna try and fix it afterwards. I don't want to keep it stalled too long. I'll fool around with it afterwards. But you have to deal with me for tonight. Now, let's jump into it. Now, again, he says the states violated statutes enacted by their duly elected legislatures, thereby violating the Constitution. Now, again, we've talked about this before. We talked about this issue before. That Pennsylvania, for example, they're saying these other states, what they did in terms of changing the rules of the election is they bypassed the state legislatures. They bypassed the normal rules for dealing with the election. They bypassed all these things and they passed them in ways that are not constitutional, meaning that in the normal sense, they basically changed the rules of how elections are made in ways that other states were not able to change because they did things that go around the laws. Texas has a very strong case with this. Again, Texas has a very strong case with this because they can argue, how can we have an election that has integrity when you have all these different problems coming up? You have all these different problems coming up, and these problems were caused by the fact that these different states bypassed the normal constitutional process when it comes to making election law changes. They violated these laws, and now we have all these problems calling into question the integrity of the elections. You have all these anomalies, all these problems. People no longer trust the system, and this is because these states bypassed the legislatures in order to pass these laws that would have been illegal had they done it otherwise, and very likely was still illegal. It's a pretty strong case, actually. Again, sorry, let me check one thing. All right, you'll have to tolerate me tonight. Sorry about that. I'll have a look at it later. Now, anyways, yeah, maybe YouTube is messing with me. It's very possible as well. Now, going into this a bit more, he continues, right? By ignoring both state and federal law, these states have not only tainted the integrity of their own citizens' vote, but of Texas and every other state that held lawful elections. Their failure to abide by the rule of law casts a dark shadow of doubt over the outcome of the entire election. We now ask that the Supreme Court step in to correct this egregious error. Now, one interesting thing with this, because the level at which this lawsuit is being filed, this is going to go directly to the Supreme Court, meaning that Texas actually is probably arguably the most significant lawsuit we have right now. This is a lawsuit that has probably a serious chance at winning. This is a lawsuit that could change the results of the election we're looking at. This is very serious and seemingly kind of happened out of nowhere. And as a quick update on it, Alabama and Louisiana are now joining in on this. Alabama, Louisiana, and Texas now suing these four states, Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, for bypassing federal and state law in order to pass laws and change the way elections are done, which caused all the issues we're seeing now. Pretty serious issue, right? Pretty serious issue. Oh, wow, geez. Real quick, Jimmy Ling, I always appreciate it, man. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Alabama and Louisiana attorney generals have released statements appreciating or supporting the Texas lawsuit. If other states started to join this lawsuit, the judicial branch will be forced to remedy these election irregularities. This will give Trump more support about 2020 election irregularities. It could even go further than that. This could have a serious impact on, say, altering the current state of the elections. If they say the elections themselves were tainted because of the way these states violated state and federal law with the changes they made to election laws, leading to all the problems we're seeing now, they're shifting the blame on the decisions made by these local, these local governors, basically. I mean, that's a pretty serious thing. Jimmy Ling again, with the third party entering the lawsuit, Trump public opinion about voters fraud getting stronger, as it is Texas state suing the 4 of 6 swing states of violating Constitution, both the federal and state level. Yeah, it's pretty serious. Now, let me go a bit deeper into this. Now, again, it says, by ignoring both federal and state law, these states have not only tainted the integrity of their own citizens' vote, but of Texas and every other state that held lawful elections. Their failure to abide by rule of law casts a dark shadow over the outcome of the entire election. We now ask the Supreme Court to step in to correct this egregious error. Meaning, again, going to the Supreme Court. It says attorneys generals from the defendant states disputed the claim in the lawsuit. Pennsylvania's Attorney General Josh Shapiro wrote on Twitter, quote, "They are a scheme by the President of the United States and some in the Republican Party to disregard the will of the people and name their own victors." Right? They're saying Texas is a scheme. Now, Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel said in a statement, quote, "The motion filed by the Texas Attorney General is a publicity stunt, not a serious legal pleading." Based on what? Publicity stunt? Going by the fact that these states, as I've mentioned repeatedly on this show, these states bypassed the legislature. They bypassed the normal course of action you would need in terms of law, state law, and federal law to alter the rules of an election. They very publicly did this. These states absolutely did something that is not constitutional when it came to this. And it's bizarre, actually, that they're making arguments trying to attack Texas and the Attorney General of making a publicity stunt, calling out this fact. Very likely, again, this is just lawyer speak because this is the way they always operate. This is just lawyer speak because they always have to come up with their arguments. And if that's the strongest argument they have, trying to accuse them of political bias, it's not a very strong argument. Let's put it that way. Now, Wisconsin Attorney General Josh Cole wrote on Twitter, quote, "Texas is as likely to change the outcome of the Ice Bowl as it is to overturn the will of Wisconsin voters in the 2020 presidential election." Katie Bird, Communications Director for Georgia Attorney General Chris Carr, wrote in an email to the Epoch Times, quote, "With all due respect, Texas Attorney General is constitutionally, legally, and factually wrong about Georgia." Well, we'll have to see about that. It's going to go to the Supreme Court now. Now, the Texas lawsuit seeks a determination by the court that the 4 battleground states conduct the 2020 election in violation of the Constitution. Paxton is asking the Supreme Court to prohibit the counting of the Electoral College votes cast by the 4 states. For the defendant states that have already appointed electors, the lawsuit asks the court to direct the state legislatures to appoint new electors in line with the Constitution. Let's break this down a bit more, right? Again, the Texas lawsuit seeks a determination by the court that the 4 battleground states conducted the 2020 election in violation of the Constitution. And so what Texas is trying to do with this lawsuit is trying to say these 4 battleground states where, again, voting rules were changed. They changed the voting rules. They allowed things to happen that would normally be illegal. And the process through which they made those changes did not follow the normal course of action. It did not go through the legislatures, the state legislatures. And they, again, violated the law by doing that, basically. They changed the rules of the game using methods that are not legal, basically. We've talked about this repeatedly. It says Paxton, and based on this, again, they're saying it violates the Constitution. Paxton is asking the Supreme Court to prohibit the counting of the Electoral College votes cast by the 4 states, meaning they're trying to ask, this is actually a pretty serious request. They're asking that based on the way these states altered these laws, that the Electoral College votes from these states should not be counted in the elections. It's a pretty bold move. It's a pretty bold move, but again, if the states violated the Constitution by changing the rules of the game in ways that you could argue were unfair to other states that played by the rules. These guys changed the rules. They were operating on a different set of rules than Texas was, than Alabama was, than these other states were. Meaning, again, you had different standards in terms of what was allowed and what was prohibited state by state because of the way they did things in these states. And again, broke the rules. Does that mean that their votes to the Electoral College should be disqualified? Now it says, for the defendant states that have already appointed electors, the lawsuit asks the court to direct the state legislature to appoint new electors in line with the Constitution. So they're arguing that these states that have already appointed their electors, that again, the court directs the state legislatures, which should have had a say in the changes to the election laws, to be able to appoint new electors in line with the Constitution. Meaning that if these are Republican electors, which a lot of these states are, they're probably going to appoint electors who will vote for Trump, meaning that Trump will get the Electoral College votes from these states. So you're looking at one of two things, very likely. Either the states are going to appoint electors very likely in favor of Trump, meaning that Trump gets at least most of these Electoral College votes, we could assume. Or two, it means that their Electoral College votes are cast out entirely. Now, we'll have to see how quickly they can move forward with this lawsuit. And it could be pretty quick, again, because by nature of this lawsuit, it's going to go directly to the Supreme Court. Now, I have heard some interesting analysis on this. You might have seen that there was another Trump lawsuit that was recently tossed out by the Supreme Court without really much deliberation. There wasn't really much they threw it out based on. And some good sources I have, you take it for what it is. These are anonymous sources, but it's analysis. It's not fact, just analysis. They had some interesting points, which was their belief was that the Supreme Court basically threw out the court cases that are less consequential because this case came about. This case actually could overturn the results of the election. This case in Texas could overturn the results of the election. This case could flip things from Biden to Trump, this alone. And again, maybe the Supreme Court throwing out these other cases, maybe that was clearing the way to make this move forward more quickly. At the very least, whether that's true or not, this is the case now. Now the Supreme Court can take this case up pretty quickly, and now this is the main case in the country, and a case that's pretty strong, not from the Trump team, not from the Trump legal team, not from Sidney Powell or Giuliani, and coming from a state that was playing by a different set of rules because other states chose to violate the Constitution, it appears, in order to change the rules of the game, in order to get, very likely someone in their own party elected. Pretty serious case you have here. Now it continues. Beyond seeking a remedy to determine the outcome of the 2020 elections, Texas is asking the Supreme Court to clarify the law for future contests. So, and in addition to seeking this result, right? In addition to again, trying to change the Electoral College votes in these states or throw these Electoral College votes out in these states completely, which would probably lead to a Trump win. They're also, again, asking the Supreme Court to clarify the law for future contests, meaning that they're asking the Supreme Court to pretty much set the laws more solidly in place, meaning that, again, some of these Senate races, for example, happening right now, may not be able to change the rules of the game as they have been. Meaning that, for example, the mass distribution of mail-in ballots and different moves like this that are the cause of a lot of the accusations of fraud, right? Meaning that these different moves will not be allowed to happen, very likely, in the ongoing elections for the Senate, for example, which is pretty serious. Again, this is a very serious lawsuit and one that could have a very big impact. Now, I'll go a bit more into this and I'll go into some questions. Now, it continues here, right? This is according to the court filing. Actually, let me step back one note on this. Now, it says here, this is according to the lawsuit. And let me actually paste in the lawsuit, those of you who are curious. So I'm pasting the lawsuit now into the live chat. Those of you coming in after this is published, check the live chat if you want to read it. It says here, in addition to injunctive relief for this election, plaintiff state seeks declaratory relief for all presidential elections in the future. This problem is clearly capable of repetition, yet evading review. Now it continues, this court's attention is profoundly needed to declare what the law is and to restore public trust in this election. Meaning, basically, the court's attention is profoundly needed. In other words, the nation needs the attention of the Supreme Court to declare what the law is. In other words, to declare whether violating the Constitution is illegal, to declare whether they deem these methods of changing election laws while bypassing these state legislatures, going against what is normally both state and federal law, whether that should be allowed. And if that was allowed, well, who knows? Maybe we'll have to see what that means, actually, because it means that violating the laws on the election was okay, I guess. But they're saying that this is needed. They need the Supreme Court to weigh in order to restore public trust in the election. And that's a pretty serious, very credible claim. This is a very serious, very credible claim. Now, Paxton filed the challenge on the day of the so-called safe harbor deadline, 6 days before states are due to certify their electors. The Attorney General is asking the Supreme Court to extend the certification deadline. So pretty much last minute, in other words, right? Now it says here, this is according to the court filing. To safeguard public legitimacy at this unprecedented moment and restore public trust in the presidential election, this court should extend the December 14th, 2020 deadline for defendant state certification of presidential electors to allow these investigations to be completed. That's another serious request. They're asking that the placement of the electoral college votes be extended. They're asking basically for a longer deadline on this, which means in the meantime that other lawsuits can be filed. You might remember one of our previous episodes. I mentioned Sidney Powell was talking about how they can continue filing lawsuits at least up to December 14th. In other words, now, if they change that date, it means they can keep filing lawsuits based on new findings. And as new evidence comes up, that could really lead into a lot of different things. This means as well that the current state of election chaos that we're witnessing could last into the who knows how long future. I don't think we've ever seen anything like this. The closest one, those of you interested, check out Tiffany Meyer. She's the host of China in Focus. She has a new show called Deep Dive with Tiffany Meyer. I was actually talking with her about some of these election law changes and how it works with the Constitution. And she mentioned the case that's closest to this would be, I think, 1871, I want to say, when there were a lot of changes made to there were a lot of allegations of voter fraud at that time as well. There were a few different issues like this, right? There have been a few different issues like this in history. And actually, interestingly, that in almost every single case where this has happened, in most of the cases, the side that won the popular vote and the side that actually won the electoral college vote ended up losing in the final outcome. And now keep that in mind. Historical cases, the side that won the popular vote and the electoral college vote, there have been cases of them losing under situations that have a lot less evidence of voter fraud than what we're seeing right now. Meaning that, but it's important to note too, if you actually read, again, she and I were talking about some of the constitutional arguments on this. And the wording in the Constitution is actually fairly unclear on how to deal with this. There's a lot of room for interpretation, meaning that the Supreme Court has a lot of room to decide for themselves how to deal with this. Meaning a few different things. One of the big ones, the outcome is unclear, right? It's too early to say what the outcome is. We can say at the very least, though, that the Texas lawsuit and some of the Trump lawsuits have a real serious chance at winning this. They do have a chance at winning this. At the same time, anything, I mean, it could go in either direction still. The way that the Constitution is worded, there's no clear process on this. It's up for interpretation. They could, again, look at the way this has been done in the past and just follow the template of how it's been done in the past. But they could also argue, because of technology, because of the anomalies we had with, for example, electronic voting, like with the Dominion and Smartmatic systems, and the changes made to election laws, for example, like we have in these 4 states, which violated the law, both state and federal laws. And also, when you're talking about changing the ways elections are done because of the coronavirus, right, the CCP virus, it's a perfect storm for election fraud. And things were done during this election that have no precedent, meaning, again, that it could go any way. We'll have to see. But at the very least, we can say there's a strong chance this is going to go far beyond December 14th, even on the ability of, say, lawyers to bring new lawsuits to the table, if the judge agrees to rule alongside Texas on this. Hey, Jimmy Ling, appreciated as always. Geez. Martial law will be easier for Trump to implement with this is Jimmy Ling, with December 18th, 2020 coming up soon, 45 days after November 3rd elections, as specified in the 2018 Trump executive order on foreign interference in the U.S. election. That's actually a good point. Now, that 2018 Trump executive order on foreign interference in the U.S. election, that's one of the big wild cards, right? One of the Trump cards, we can call it. Trump has there's at least 2 Trump cards, I'll say, and pun intended on this one, but it's actually the most accurate way of saying it. One being, again, the 2018 executive order that Trump filed, which declared a national emergency, which gives him pretty broad powers if he does want to do something drastic. Whether he's going to do that, who knows? But to be honest, I wouldn't put anything beyond Trump. Again, I've been, of course, following the news on the Chinese Communist Party since about 2008. Been an investigative reporter on China news. Been looking at Chinese subversion in the U.S. And actually, there's some big updates on this, which we'll get to in a little bit. Big updates on China's involvement in this election. I'll get to that in a little bit. Yeah, really interesting stuff, actually, tying into some reports we had on this channel, actually. But back to this, I've been watching what's happening with China for a long time. And to be honest, up until about 2016, I didn't have a lot of hope with the way things were heading, because you can look at the trajectory of what China was doing, look at the different countries and their governments and the government's position on the laws and types of ways that China was waging unconventional war on these countries. You could look at all these different things and see that very little was being done. A lot of ground had already been taken by the Chinese Communist Party. And the trajectory of it was it was almost unstoppable. I personally did not think much could be done about it up until 2016. Trump got elected, and he took a very hard stance on China. And he did drastic things that I never thought any president would ever do. And I know he was criticized for a lot of that. He was criticized for his harsh stance on China. Like, for example, sanctioning Hong Kong officials, including the chief executive of Hong Kong, basically the president of Hong Kong, if it were a country, and many other officials for basically violating the the rights of the Hong Kong people. I never thought a president would do anything like that. He did. I never thought a president would, for example, sanction Huawei and ban the sale of chips to Huawei, basically crippling China's high-tech economy. I never thought that would happen. I never thought that the president would wage a trade war in the way he has, that he would go against the interests of Wall Street. A very big move. Go against the interests of Wall Street itself, like he is right now. For example, trying to basically kick out Chinese companies, essentially, if they don't make their books clear, if they don't play by the same rules. A lot of these things I would never expect him to do. And I know there's speculation now on whether Trump would declare a national emergency and do something. We're technically under a national emergency from that 2018 executive order. Whether he would declare martial law, I would not put it beyond him. Let's put it that way. One thing I've learned about Trump is he's actually very unpredictable. And it's interesting. So, back in like, late high school, I had a friend who was really he got into playing poker, and he was very good at it. And this is kind of a side note, right? I had a friend who was, he's played poker and he was very good at it, and he used to read all these different booklets and stuff on it. And I found the only way I could beat him, because we used to play together, was if I did things that were totally illogical. They were totally unexpected. In poker, you would call a person like that a maniac. And I know it's not a very nice word, but you call it a maniac. And it's basically a person who does things in a totally unpredictable manner. Now, normally, when you're dealing with intelligence analysis and, trajectory-based analysis, and you're trying to figure out the way things normally operate, right? You're trying to figure out the way things normally work, right? The way you're trying to figure out things normally work, Trump doesn't work that way, right? Well, let me get into a bit more. For example, normally you have bureaucracies. Normally you have your modus operandi, the way things normally operate. Governments have their standard operations. When I do analysis on China, this is a lot of the method I use, as a matter of fact. For example, imagine you're constructing a machine, and you know that each specific branch and each individual has a certain role in the functioning of that machine. You can sometimes see a hint at a conflict if you see one individual turning the levers in the branch that another individual should be working in. For example, Xi Jinping and the Chinese premier having a conflict with each other. You could see Xi Jinping getting involved in his affairs, basically when it comes to the Chinese economy. And you could witness some of the tensions between them and assume something is happening. This is that kind of analysis. You're looking at the normal functions of a bureaucracy. You're looking at the normal way people operate, the normal way people behave. And when there is an anomaly within that, you can make assumptions and look for evidence to give grounds to those assumptions that something may be happening. It's a normal type of analysis. Trump violates this type of analysis like you wouldn't believe. He's very hard to predict. Interestingly, it's actually why a lot of militaries complain about the U.S. being hard to predict and when it comes to military fighting, because the way our soldiers and Marines are trained here, you have guys who can kind of pick up and lead and make decisions on the fly in terms of the decisions they make. It's not a strictly hierarchical, top-down, you have to follow the guy above you type way of doing things. There's a lot of room for personal decisions in terms of how to strategize based on the unique situation you're in. Trump works like that. And because of that, he's very hard to predict. And to say that he would not do something, to say that he would not declare a national emergency or, declare martial law even and go after some of these people, I wouldn't put it beyond him, to be honest. Like him or not, I wouldn't put it beyond him. And, it's just the way he works. He's very hard to predict. And he will do things you never thought he'd do. And oftentimes they're pretty effective a lot of times. Look at the way he handled North Korea. Look at when was the last time North Korea threatened nuclear holocaust, right? When was the last time North Korea threatened to blow up Guam? It's been a while, right? Look at how he handled ISIS. When was the last time you saw ISIS beheading people on camera and threatening, to attack Europe and such? I can't remember the last time. He's made some interesting moves that are hard to predict. Now, let me go into a few questions and we'll keep moving on here. James Sikat, thank you for the donation. Hey, Josh, big fan. What are your thoughts about SCOTUS denying the GOP lawsuit over the mail-in ballots? This is a big L, as in loser, for the GOP Pennsylvania lawsuit, right? Yeah, it was interesting. They seem to have thrown it out without a whole lot of deliberation. And I mentioned briefly some of my analysis on that. I'll repeat a little bit of it now. This is pure speculation, pure analysis. Take it for what it's worth. And this is based on, I've had discussions with some other experts on this, and this was what they told me also, that it's very possible, if you're talking about maybe personal interest, party interest, maybe they threw it out because they knew this Texas lawsuit was coming. Maybe they threw it out because of the time limits right now in terms of dealing with what we're seeing. They want to clear the space for the most important lawsuits that are the most consequential. Maybe that's the reason. Maybe they wanted to clear the Supreme Court so they can deal with the most consequential lawsuit that has the biggest chance of winning, that appears to be the least biased, and that could have the biggest impact in terms of changing the results of the election within the shortest amount of time possible. Maybe that's why they threw it out. And this Texas lawsuit aligning very closely with this, it's not a far-fetched analysis. It's analysis. Take it for what it's worth. I'm not saying this is absolutely the case, right? This is analysis. But regardless of whether that was the reason or not, we can say that regardless of whether or not it was intentional, this will be the result of that. The Supreme Court now has room to hear another case. The Supreme Court now has room to hear another case, and now this Texas lawsuit coming up is going directly to there. Now, is that strategic? Is this a random coincidence? Who knows? The outcome of this, though, is that the Supreme Court is now hearing a very serious lawsuit, this Texas lawsuit, that has a real chance at winning, and that will, if it does win, pretty much turn the elections from Biden to Trump in a way that's not pinned on Trump himself. Right? This will be a state lawsuit, not a Trump team lawsuit, and not Trump's legal team lawsuit. Pure analysis, take it for what it's worth. Again, regardless of whether that analysis is true or not, the outcome will be the same. The outcome is the same. Chris, thanks for the donation. Do you have any info on reports of naval ships being positioned off east and west coasts as reported by Hal Turner Radio? I have not heard that. Although there were several months back, there were some weird reports, for example, about the U.S. Navy being positioned in the Caribbean to allegedly stop some of these drug traffickers. There was actually very little reporting on it. There was very little reporting on it. And so it was hard to follow that story, actually. But U.S. naval ships were repositioned to the Caribbean. I don't know the details on it. We don't know why it happened. The public disclosures on what was happening were very thin. And so you can draw your own conclusions on that. Something was happening. Allegedly, it was to stop drug trafficking operations. Who knows, right? On that note, too, I still do have. Again, I was in California and got to crawl through one of these trafficking tunnels they have on the border. I did some reporting with Border Patrol down there, and one of their special teams that works on these tunnels, their tunnel rat team, took me into one of these tunnels, and I do have footage of that. We're doing kind of a bigger production on that. Basically, for that piece, I went into one of the tunnels, climbed down this big long ladder, and it was interesting. There's a rail system in there, like a very simple rail system, oxygen systems, bizarre stuff. We did that. We also did some reporting with the normal Border Patrol agents, talking about the fence. We look at the fence, the different types of fencing. And then we also did some reporting with one of the special teams that does the maritime monitoring and apprehensions. And so we have a more complete piece we're working on for that. So keep an eye out for that special feature. Let's moving on. Southern Wind, thanks for the donation. 7 states joined Texas lawsuit. Is it 7 now? Wow, last time I checked, it was just 2 other ones. I'll have to double confirm this, but I trust you on this for now. All right, 7 states joined Texas lawsuit. Louisiana, Arkansas, Alabama, Florida, Kentucky, Mississippi, South Carolina, South Dakota. Let me just run this real quick, just to double check, make sure I'm not telling you all rumors, but I trust you on this, buddy. Yeah, it's true. All right, as we were speaking, it is now extended. This Texas lawsuit has just become something significantly larger than it was. Arkansas, Alabama, Florida, Kentucky, Mississippi, South Carolina, South Dakota announced they've joined the Texas election fraud lawsuit. This is a big deal. This is no longer just Texas. This means even that the statements we read earlier from the attorney generals in these states saying that this is just a political move, right? Saying this is just a political move by the Texas attorney general, That's no longer the case. That argument is out the window. And if that was really the strongest argument they could make, this is game over for these guys. Yeah, this is a big deal. Now, again, going back to your question before, I remember as well, right? The Supreme Court denied the GOP lawsuit over the mail-in ballots. The analysis I've heard from pretty credible individuals, and an analysis that I would share as well. Maybe that was thrown out for a reason. Maybe that was thrown out to make way in the Supreme Court for the most consequential lawsuit we've seen yet. To make way for a lawsuit that is the least biased when it comes to the aggrieved parties of Trump and Biden. To make way for a lawsuit that is not going to be just viewed as a partisan battle, Trump stealing the election, as would be the narrative if Trump's team won this. And again, they have pretty strong lawsuits as well. Maybe this is making way for that. Maybe that was the reason. And regardless of whether that was the case, based on the way that a state lawsuit is going to happen, this is going directly to the Supreme Court, meaning we won't have to deal with all these local judges trying to throw this out. It's going directly to the Supreme Court. And so, again, this is serious, very serious chance at winning, I would say, and just got about 8 times bigger. Yeah, big deal. All right, moving on. Justin Anderson, appreciate the donation. Josh Phillips, please be careful on Saturday. I will. I mean, yeah, again, folks, those of you who are going to be at the Stop the Steal rally in Washington, I'm going to be there reporting live. We're working on it. Epoch Times, we're going to have a set, and Epoch Times and Entity, we're working together. We're going to have a setup right on the National Mall. Cool camera setup. We rented a satellite system. We're going all out. Yeah, come find us there. Come say hi. It's going to be good stuff. And again, there's going to be the Stop the Steal protests in a lot of parts of the U.S. happening. Those of you going to be in Washington, I'll be there this Saturday. Some pretty good folks organizing, and I think the Washington one is through the Phyllis Schlafly Eagles, and there's some good folks actually. Now let's go deeper into it. Let's see here. Now let me jump now into some other news stories, and then I'll go back into some of the questions. So one sec, because there's been some big updates. Now I got a big one for y'all. Another pretty serious thing. Oh, Jimmy Ling, it's always really appreciated. Jeez. Whoever turned down these lawsuits of 7 states will be political suicide, whether you like Trump or not. That's actually true. If somebody shoots down lawsuits now from seven different states on the grounds that the states they're challenging did in fact violate the laws that these other states are required to follow, and the states where these laws were violated are required to follow, changing the rules of the game and altering the outcome of the elections. If they throw that out, it's going to look really bad. That's actually a good point. And very likely, again, I'll repeat, this is the Texas lawsuit now been joined by 7 other states is very serious, a very big lawsuit. I just pasted the link to the story we're discussing in the live chat. Those of you coming in after this premieres, check the live chat. All right. Do you all remember the interview I published on this channel? Dr. Ding Dong Sheng, the Associate Dean of the School of International Studies at the Renmin University of China in Beijing. Do you remember that video I published? Well, that video yesterday and today has gone viral. Fox News, Tucker Carlson did a video on it. A lot of big media have done stories on it. And they're now talking about what I said in our video, that the Chinese Communist Party, according to this doctor who has a pretty serious enough position to make these claims, that the Chinese Communist Party, they were saying they were able to control Wall Street. And through the control of Wall Street, they were able to control the U.S. elections. They were able to control. They were able to control the U.S. political system. That was the allegation, and it's one that I can back up because, again, I've been covering China for the past 12 years. The Chinese Communist Party, through financial interests, the banking industry, and the financial industry, has been able to lobby and impact the U.S. government. And this is interesting because they say they were not able to control Trump. And because of this, this is why they were trying to help the other side. This is why they were opposing Trump so heavily. And this is a very serious admission. Now, I'll be honest, I've been following China for 12 years. For me, this is a claim like this is when I first saw this, I was like, yeah, we know this already. But again, sometimes having it stated in a way so publicly and by an authoritative voice nails down the intention you have behind this. Now, this story, after it has gone viral, again, I published it on Crossroads several days ago. In the past 2 days, it's gone, not our video, unfortunately, but the story itself has gone viral. I don't think anybody credited us, actually. Epoch Times and NCD, I think we were the ones who broke the story. I don't think anybody's really credited us for it, but it's okay. Not a big deal. The big story here, though, is that this is now bringing up a broader discussion of the fact that many of these governors where you have these problems taking place were very close to the Chinese Communist Party. What are the chances of that? The CCP, through its control of Wall Street, right? The Chinese Communist Party in China, the Chinese government, through its control of Wall Street, was able to impact the U.S. political system, to control the U.S. political system. The Chinese Communist Party was using the banking and financial industries to control the U.S. political system, lobbying them through other methods. They have more to it than this, which I've discussed many times in the show. Now, this is bringing up the issue that, interestingly, the Chinese Communist Party, there was a leaked document. We reported on it months ago. There was a leaked document where the Chinese Communist Party, in fact, I think Pompeo himself mentioned it. It was in one of the actions they did against the Chinese Communist Party, against their influence operations. They had a document listing all 50 U.S. governors of all 50 U.S. states, and gave them ratings on how much under the influence of the CCP they were. This was a Chinese state document. Some folks have pulled that document down and say, isn't it interesting that all the top people influenced by the Chinese Communist Party are the ones who are the governors of the states where we're seeing the biggest issues with election fraud? What a coincidence. What a coincidence that all the top governors who are close to the Chinese Communist Party seem to be the ones we're having the most problems with right now in the elections. What are the chances of that? Now, let me go into this article now, and I'll go into some questions afterwards. Now, the Chinese Communist regime exerted influence over the United States for decades through its, quote, old friends in Wall Street. But the scheme was disrupted by President Donald Trump's election in 2016. And that's a Chinese professor revealed this during a recent seminar. Over the past 30 to 40 years, the Chinese Communist Party, quote, took advantage of the core power circle in the United States, said Dr. Ding Dongsheng, Associate Dean of the School of International Studies at the Renmin University of China in Beijing, in a speech given at an event in Shanghai, live streamed on Chinese online video sharing platform Guan Video on November 28. The clip has since gone viral, and the original video has been deleted. Now, it should be clear, this individual is not criticizing the CCP. This individual is acting proud of the fact that they've done this. It was not originally published as a criticism of the Chinese Communist Party. This was him kind of bragging about, what's been going on. Now, D was referring to Wall Street, a sector that started exerting, quote, a very strong influence on U.S. domestic and foreign affairs in the 1970s. And he said, quote, so we figured out our path and those we could depend on, suggesting again that their subversion of Wall Street was their way into political influence in the U.S. and around the world. Now, but from 2008, Wall Street's influence declined as the financial crisis hit. That's according to him. And he said this, quote, more importantly, starting in 2016, Wall Street had no influence on Trump. And he cited disputes the former businessman had with Wall Street financiers. However, with a potential Joe Biden administration, Beijing may once again rely on its powerful U.S. backers, according to this professor. Again, in this video, he's bragging about this. He's proud about this. And he says this, quote, the traditional elites, political elites, and the establishment have a very close relationship with Wall Street. And then he referred to allegations that Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, has extensive ties with the Chinese regime and other foreign governments through investments and business dealings. Now, in October, Tony Bobulinski, Hunter's former business partner, revealed that the younger Biden in early 2017 asked him to execute a deal with the now bankrupt Chinese energy conglomerate CEFC, China Energy Company. Bobulinski served as CEO of Sinohawk LLC, a business entity created to formalize the Biden CEFC investment partnership with that Chinese company. Now, Sinohawk was supposed to have been initially funded with $10 million, which would then grow into billions in investment funds. Bobulinski said at the time, according to him. Now, then chairman of CEFC, Yi Jianming, had deep ties with Chinese high-level officials, CCP officials. Now, Dee said this, quote, this doctor again, quote, those who helped him, meaning Hunter Biden, build the funds, you understand, there are transactions involved. He's giving details on this, and he's bragging about this. Now, in 2016, then candidate Trump campaigned on a tough on China platform, focusing on the regime's unfair trade practices that have cost thousands of American manufacturing jobs. As president, Trump in 2018 launched a trade war, slapping billions worth of tariffs on a range of Chinese imports. Now, in reference to the trade war, Dee asked, quote, why are we having trouble with Trump? When we were able to handle all kinds of problems between China and the United States from 1992 to 2016. Now, he said that previously, quote, all crisis between China and the United States, such as the U.S. bombing of the Chinese embassy in Belgrade in 1999, which was an accident, allegedly, were able to be resolved within 2 months. Now, he says this, the reason for this is that Beijing had, quote, people in high places in the United States. The CCP had people in high places in the United States. Who are these people in high places in the United States who were able to basically manage relationships between China and the United States? Now, Wall Street had tried to help the Chinese regime during the U.S.-China trade war, according to him. And he said this, quote, as far as I know, friends from the U.S. told me that they tried to help, but they were too weak, meaning they were not able to influence Trump. Now, Dee shared a story to prove his point. Prior to Chinese leader Xi Jinping's visit to the United States in 2015, that was when he met with Obama, all levels of the CCP had to help, quote, warm up and, quote, build momentum for the high-profile event. Now, according to him, he said such warm-up was to create positive public opinion about the Chinese regime. A book release event was organized for the publication of the first English language edition of Xi Jinping on State Administration, a book containing Xi Jinping's speeches on political ideology. In other words, that was all orchestrated, according to him. Dee said he was assigned to find a venue for that event. The location was set at a popular independent bookstore on Connecticut Avenue in Washington, D.C. However, due to the short notice, the bookstore was unable to arrange the time slot. Dee claimed the bookstore's manager was a former reporter based in Asia, and he was unwilling to accommodate Dee's request due to his bias towards the CCP. Bias. But eventually, Dee said, Chinese officials managed to hold the press conference at the bookstore because a store owner was pressured by an elderly Jewish woman who had some clout on Wall Street. The woman was the chairman of the Asia division of a top financial institute on Wall Street, according to Dee at least. She had Chinese citizenship and a Beijing registered permanent residence. Those of you who don't know, for a non-Chinese native to get Chinese citizenship and a Beijing registered permanent residence in China, that is almost impossible. You would have to do something serious to win the favor of the Chinese Communist Party to get something like that. And actually in the video, you can watch the video on our channel. We actually published it, I think one of the first ones. You can watch the video where he explains that even he was surprised to find someone who had that level of influence. But again, the woman was the chairwoman of the Asia division of a top financial institution on Wall Street. And he's using this as an example to show the degree to which the CCP has friends in high places in Wall Street who have served the interests of the CCP in terms of influencing U.S. politics. Now, a Chinese state media report praised the event afterwards. Quote, on September 17, 2015, the bookstore hosted Chinese ambassador to the United States, Kwai Tiankai, and a senior Chinese government official for discussion about Xi's book on governing China. Now, going into these Wall Street ties. Following the trade war, many American industrial sectors began to shy away from Chinese investment, but Wall Street has deepened its business ties after Beijing's move to open up the financial sector. White House trade advisor Peter Navarro, who did the film Death by China, if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. He said in an October interview with the Epoch Times, he described Wall Street as writ large a sociopath in response to a question about Wall Street's continued ramp up of investment in China. He said, quote, they have no morals or patriotism. It's all about the money. Meanwhile, global stock index providers have come under increasing scrutiny over their inclusion of Chinese stocks, with some Chinese firms being tied to the regime's military or having aided its human rights abuses, stuff Trump has been going hard on. Now, because many investment and pension funds track these indices, it means that Americans are unwittingly financing the CCP's malign ambitions. And now this is a warning from U.S. officials. In November, Trump issued an executive order barring U.S. investment in Chinese companies deemed by the Pentagon to be, quote, owned or controlled by the Chinese military, which is a lot of them, and to block the flow of American capital to fund the CCP's military goals. The ban is to take effect in early January 2021. Meaning that this election is going to have a massive, massive impact on the interests of the CCP. To what degree would the CCP act to protect those interests? Do you think the CCP, if it had influence within Wall Street, with these powerful individuals that control the country's finances, would they use these networks to influence the outcome of the election? Would they go through their friends in high places in the United States to lobby them and ask them to impact the outcome of this election? Would they be involved in a $400 million deal to one of the big companies, or working on the transaction to one of the big companies that owns the systems that run most of the U.S. elections? Hypothetically speaking, $400 million, right? To what degree would they do this? Would they, for example, use the United Front and Overseas Chinese Affairs Office and their networks, including the General Political Department Liaison Department, to pull the strings of their list of governors who are friendly towards the CCP, to alter the outcome of the elections, to push them to change election voting laws? Would they do this, right? These are serious questions we need to ask when it comes to this. And serious questions, actually, that are becoming part of the national debate on this issue. Now, I'll finish this up because there's only a few paragraphs left. Now, on this, right? We're talking about Trump and his executive order taking effect in November 2021 when it comes to these companies and their ability to trade in the U.S., tied to the Chinese military. In response, index provider FTSE Russell announced on December 4th that it would drop shares of 8 Chinese companies that were on the Pentagon list. The company's shares will be removed from its FTSE Global Equity Index series and several others effective December 21. Now, during the 2020 presidential election cycle, Wall Street contributed more than $70 million to Democratic Party candidate Joe Biden's political campaign, much more than Trump received from hedge funds and investment banks, according to CNBC. Now, let's think about Wall Street a bit. Then $70 million, more than $70 million to the Biden campaign, significantly more than Biden. Which big international financiers that we know of, people involved in the international finance system, which big names do we know of who are deeply involved in also providing money to the grassroots sides of all the protests and all the different movements that swept across the country? Where was the money from that coming from? Which groups were tied to that? Were there people deeply involved in Wall Street giving money to these organizations that helped destabilize this country during that time? What businesses, major companies, have shares and interests on Wall Street? Which of these companies have serious ties to the Chinese Communist Party? I'm thinking of most of the big tech companies. I'm thinking quite a few major corporations that got seriously hit by some of the executive orders, for example, on slave labor in Xinjiang. I'm thinking quite a few big companies that may have had serious special interest with the outcome of this election and serious interest in protecting the interests of the Chinese Communist Party. Not saying that was the reason, but this is a pretty serious allegation again, right? Now, since Democrats raised a substantial amount of money from the sector, quote, that means to me they're making deals, Trump told reporters on November 3rd at his campaign headquarters in Virginia. And he said this as well, quote, what I didn't do is call up Wall Street and say, this is Trump saying this, what I didn't do is call up Wall Street and say, send me $25 million to the head of every firm. I could have done that. I would have been the all-time king of fundraising if I did that. But once you do that, you can no longer deal properly with them. You just can't. In other words, had he done that, had he taken money from them, it would have been some kind of exchange. They would have expected something in return, and he was not willing to do that. Wall Street, again, was not able to control Trump. Wall Street, again, is closely aligned with the Chinese Communist Party. And Wall Street, again, may have played some serious role in what's happening right now, according to this individual. And the CCP's use of its friends in high places through these networks of control, who were able to influence U.S. politics, meaning political level individuals, maybe governors or other politicians, such as senators or House members. Who knows how high it went? According to this individual, acting to some extent in the interests of the Chinese Communist Party through these networks of influence. Very serious stuff. Now, it's getting late, so I don't want to go much further. I'll go to a couple questions and then we'll call it a night. Go with a couple questions and call it a night. But these two stories, Texas and what we're seeing right now with Wall Street. These two stories, the Texas lawsuit joined now by 7 other states, serious chance at overturning the election results, making basically clearing the way for Trump to win if it moves forward, and it looks like it will. Between this and the talk about the Chinese Communist Party having influence lines into our political system, and looking, for example, now at governors in these states, ironically, that are mostly involved with these problems, being pretty high up on the publicly disclosed list the CCP has of people it has influence over. These are the two biggest stories in the country right now. These two stories, I think, are going to be the two to watch. And there's other ones as well. But the two biggest stories to watch right now, the third being, I think, Dominion. And we can expect, again, the forensic analysis of those 22 Dominion machines coming out possibly tomorrow morning. I've heard some information on this. I won't repeat it, but Dominion may also become the third factor that's going to seriously call into question the integrity of this election. We have now these three top issues. There's other big ones, but these are going to be the ones I think in the near future having the biggest impact in terms of turning things around. Keep an eye out on them. Real quick, Denise Coop, what do you think? I really appreciate it also, and good seeing you as well. What do you think of the Chinese spy case with Eric Swalwell? I find it ironic that he was screaming about Russia when in 2015 the FBI notified him a spy was fundraising for him and advising him on who would be a good aid for him. So I've had a lot of experience working on this topic. I won't repeat it fully again, but since 2008, my job at the Epoch Times, I accidentally uncovered the United Front, basically, doing some investigative work in New York as a reporter, of course. The United Front is one of the Chinese Communist Party's main spy branches that specifically works on building networks exactly like this. I've been reporting on this since 2008. And in fact, some of my original articles were specifically around the Chinese Communist Party building these networks for political influence, specifically around a local New York election. In fact, I won. It was a little award, but I won an award for that actually, through the New York Press Association. It was second place because it came in, I think, a year or two after the fact. I've been reporting on this since 2008. United Front Work Department becoming one of the main focuses of the U.S. government right now, the Trump administration, when it comes to looking at their networks of influence into colleges, journalists, politicians, academics, you name it. The CCP targets the elite of a society through the United Front Work Department. This works through what they call tongs. They're the fraternal organizations that work as the unofficial governments and the unofficial overseas branches of the Chinese Communist Party in different countries on American soil, in New York, San Francisco, just about every major city. These are in turn managed by the local Chinese consulates, and these organizations go and try to penetrate the local societies, inviting politicians on trips back to China, inviting journalists on trips to China, inviting academics to go on speaking events in China, and through this process, subverting them. I've deeply exposed this story over the years. In fact, I broke some of the original stories on this as well. I've been reporting on this for 12 years. The number of politicians who have been compromised by the Chinese Communist Party would shock you. The number of journalists, academics, business leaders in this country and many other countries who have been subverted and compromised by the Chinese Communist Party would shock you to the core. The number of spies the CCP has on U.S. soil, not James Bond spies, but even low-level spies, if you count them all, there's a very large number. These organizations, you're talking about them naming tens of thousands, some claiming hundreds of thousands of members. These operations are massive, and they operate publicly. You can go on last time I checked a few months back, you could go on the New York Chinese consulate website, and you have the United Front Work Department listed on the website, operating with impunity, not just in the US, but just about every country in the world. And it's interesting now that this is becoming one of the main points of discussion with election fraud, with what's happening in these different states, with whether these politicians and their actions right now are not just party interests, not just Democrats and Republicans, but China and the United States acting against the interests of their own country. That would be a serious, serious case. And we'll have to see what comes out of it. Mario Velakis, always good seeing you here. Thanks for the support. Yeah, this should buy my Chinese citizenship, Josh. All right, folks. I'm going to call it a night. I'm going to be talking all night, but always enjoy doing these lives. I'm going to be continuing these again for the foreseeable future. And again, I'm going to keep trying to do as well the normal broadcasts, some of the news reports, getting them out. And as well, you've also been seeing, we've been publishing, for example, hearings, live video from hearings, live video from some of these rallies, live video from some of these events, because they're not getting covered. They're not getting coverage almost anywhere. It's very hard to find these videos. And so we've been publishing them on the Crossroads channel. Epoch Times and NTD have been sending reporters out to some of these areas, and we've been getting the footage from them. Folks, I always really appreciate the donations and appreciate the support in all ways. You folks are great. And I apologize, I can't get to everybody, but it's, yeah, I wish I could. I'd be talking all night, but I really deeply appreciate it. And, the team at Crossroads appreciates this as well. So again, this Saturday, those of you who are going to be in Washington, I'm actually going to be at the protest reporting live. We actually rented a satellite car, so we're going to see if we can do it. It's going to be interesting to say the least. Also, I'm going to be doing these live videos again, Sunday through Friday. I will not be doing Saturdays. And also as well, doing our interviews, publishing the interviews I've been doing across the country. In addition to that, we have a very good special feature coming up. I think you're all going to really like. I don't want to give too many details just yet, but I think you're all really going to like it. I'll just leave it at that. Now, folks, as always, appreciate your support. Great seeing you all here. Yeah. Katrina Milbrand, thank you. Yeah, you folks are great. Yeah. Let's see here. Lisa Lee, thank you. Roder, Josh go on Colbert. That'd be an interesting mix. I'd consider it. I don't know. We'll have to see. I can only imagine how that would go. Rock, drink the tea. I got black tea tonight. Yeah. All right, folks, I'll leave it here. Again, always appreciate you all. As always, stay informed. Take care of yourselves as always, of course, and stay free. Thank you.